Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Front Page on GNAT TV. I'm Andrew McKeever, the managing editor of the Manchester Journal. It's my pleasure to be your host today, and it's also my pleasure to welcome to our studios two distinguished gentlemen who will be with us to talk a little bit about the economy of southern Vermont, with a certain emphasis on Bennington County, of course. To my right is Jim Sullivan, who is the executive director of the Bennington County Regional Commission. And to my left is Bill Colvin, who is the Assistant Director of the Bennington County Regional Commission and Director of the Bennington County Regional Commission's Sustainable Community Development Program. Gentlemen, thank you for coming and making the time available.
Thank you, Andrew.
Great to have you with us. So I was just thinking, Jim, before we kind of launch into our discussion about the economy of Bennington County and where it's going, tell us a little bit about the Bennington County Regional Commission. A lot of folks, I'm sure, are familiar with it, have heard about it, read about it in the papers. But what exactly is the mission of the organization?
Great, thank you. Well, the Bennington County Regional Commission is one of 11 regional planning commissions in Vermont. We cover most of Bennington County. We are created by state law and organized by the member municipalities, the 17 member municipalities in our region. We were founded back in the late 1960s, actually. Been around for a while. And the original focus of the organization and all the regional planning commissions in the state was really around land use planning and in response to some early development trends back then and the need for technical assistance to municipalities to help them get ready to deal with some of the new development that was going on. Over the years, the BCRC, Bennington County Regional Commission, and other regional planning commissions have certainly continued that role. It's been an important part of what we do, technical assistance to municipalities in the area of land use planning. And we've also, over time gotten involved in a lot of other different program areas where we work with the Agency of Transportation to provide local transportation planning services, kind of as a liaison between municipalities and the state and federal transportation agencies. Emergency management has become an increasingly significant part of what we do in all of its aspects. We also work with a lot of municipalities on the solid waste implementation activities. And I would say that community and economic development, what we're talking about tonight, has always been a topic that we've covered in our municipal and regional plans. It's required by state law that we have a focus on economic development in the planning documents that we do. But a few years ago, we decided that we really wanted to provide a greater level of assistance and support to the towns in our region, the villages in our region, and try to provide some direct technical assistance to support economic development planning, to support the types of activities that support and strengthen community assets in the regions that facilitate economic development. Because I've always seen our mission, which you asked about, it took me a while to get there, our mission to really improve the quality of life for the residents of the region. And I see doing that as really a continuum from planning and kind of laying the groundwork for how we get from where we are to where we want to be, to the community development activities that are supporting and fostering and strengthening those local assets, and then leading directly into the economic development initiatives that will strengthen the economy.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if I just might add, Andrew, I think one particularly interesting thing that people may not understand about the Regional Commission is that in the absence of county government in Vermont, regional planning commissions around the state fulfill many of those functions.
Right.
Other than sheriffs and courts, Vermont doesn't really have county government, so things that typically happen at a county level, land use, transportation planning, solid waste planning, emergency management, all of those things, we are under a contractual agreement with the state to provide those services. So there's actually a kind of a county government function to our work as well.
All right, very good. Yeah, because Vermont always has a sort of town-centric kind of approach to things.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, maybe you can pick up from there and talk to us a little bit about where you folks see the economy of Bennington County and southern Vermont in general, I suppose, going? Are we moving in the right direction? Are we waffling sideways? What's the picture emerging?
So as is often the case, I think the story of the Bennington County economy is a mixed one. If you look at kind of the economic and demographic trends, many of them are fairly static. Population has been static since about the early 1980s. Population really hasn't changed very much. We know that incomes relative to to the state and to the state of Vermont and other states has remained relatively the same in terms of percentages, in which we tend to lag behind both. One of the challenges clearly is an aging demographic. We see that a little bit less in certain areas of Bennington, primarily because of the college age market, which I think influences those numbers. But in general, Vermont, and particularly southern Vermont, has an aging demographic, which presents potential challenges with regard to future workforce needs, expansion possibilities, and recruitment possibilities for businesses. So a lot of focus and concern around workforce, the availability of workforce, the appropriate skill set of workforce relative to jobs that might be available in the region. And those are all things that we're trying to be helpful with regard to planning and implementation activities. So we recently did, a little over a year ago, worked with the town of Bennington to do a comprehensive economic development strategy for that community. We're now engaged in a kind of very exciting, I think, consortium project with Manchester, town of Manchester, Manchester Village, and Dorset to do what we're terming a North Shire, for lack of a better word really, but really 3 municipality economic development strategy in the northern part of the county. And I think ultimately our goal would be having the kind of 2 shires covered, bringing together planning to include all of the county in terms of really comprehensive economic development planning, looking for opportunities to kind of share resources, share opportunities, and address common challenges, perhaps in a little more comprehensive and collaborative way.
Are there big differences between the economies of the South Shire and the North Shire? I mean, we tend probably to think of Bennington and the southern part of the county more as a manufacturing sort of center, tourism and services, maybe generally speaking, more so the case up here. But is that categorization or generalization and oversimplification of things, or is there some truth to that?
I mean, there's certainly some truth to it. Manufacturing activity is greater in the Bennington region. There's more tourism dollars. I think there's certainly much more in the hospitality realm, especially now happening in the North Shire. And there's some income disparities, as well, although not that dramatic between the North Shire and South Shire. So there are some real differences, but there are many more similarities. I think at the Vermont Digger Forum a couple of weeks ago, I think really Don Keelan he was the perfect kind of last speaker, and he kind of summed up that kind of North Shire, South Shire divide, and how the North Shire really relies on the South Shire, for medical services, for a lot of institutes of higher education, and we really need to be thinking much more as a county.
And I mean, I think we do have a lot of very similar resources and assets between the North Shire and South Shire, and I think historically the difference has been greater than it is going forward. I think that the opportunities that are provided through modern technology and transportation really kind of is starting to blur those differences and really offers opportunities for everybody to start working together. And I think that's very true within our region, and I think it's also true if you look around the periphery of our region and look at some of the surrounding regions, like we've been doing a lot, Bill has, especially in Windham County, and there's also tremendous opportunities, I think, in Berkshire County, Massachusetts, because we share a transportation corridor, and again, a lot of similar resources.
I guess I was wondering, Bill, you and I were both at a conference this morning, or a meeting of a committee that's working on the Southern Vermont Economic Development Zone. Right. And very interesting sounding task ahead of them. One of the issues that seemed to keep coming up repeatedly this morning in that meeting was workforce development.
Sure.
You touched upon that a moment ago, but wondered if you could kind of unwrap that a little bit for us. I mean, the problem, if I understood it correctly, sounded like it's not like there's too many workers chasing too few jobs, but plenty of jobs out there, but not enough qualified workers to fill them. Is that accurate, or?
So what we do know is that there's a bit of a disconnect between the jobs that are available and the skill sets in the community that are available. What's a little less clear is terms of how many actual people are running around looking for jobs that can't find those jobs. We know that unemployment is very low in the state, it's very low in the region. There becomes a point where you really have reached kind of full functional employment. There's always going to be a percentage of the workforce that really is not, it's just not going to be employed. So I think really it's almost a matchmaking challenge, if you will, in identifying the predominant skills which are required for the jobs in the area and making sure that those skills are available in the workforce or that training is available to get to people those skills in the workforce. And I think that's really the challenge at this point, is aggregating the necessary skill sets and figuring out a way to make sure those skills are passed into the community so that people are appropriately trained for the jobs that are available. I think the other challenge with regard to workforce, it was touched on this morning, we know it's an issue, is the availability of, particularly at a professional level, similar types of jobs in the region. And let's use Southern Vermont as the region. There's this whole issue with regard to trying to attract talent for a particular job at a relatively high pay level. The fear being that I come work for a company, if I lose my job and I've moved here, where do I go? Is there another similar job somewhere in the region that I don't have to completely uproot my life again
Right.
and go away? Yeah. And concurrently, what is my working partner do? Is there a job of an equivalent level in the region available for my partner? So this whole quote unquote trailing spouse issue. So I think those are things that we know are out there. We know that they're issues. One of the things that we've proposed doing across Southern Vermont is the development of the Southern Vermont Jobs Board, so that academic institutions, with regard to their students and employers, are kind of sharing this information so that there's a much better understanding about, for the college students coming out, that actually there is an opportunity to stay in Vermont after you graduate and have a good job. And for people perhaps looking to come to the region, a little greater sense of comfort that if this particular company doesn't work out, I've got another option, and so does my spouse.
Right, right. Jim, I was wondering if this is an area that the BCRC gets into, and that's the whole housing question, or affordable housing, as it's often referred to. I'm sure that both in Bennington and up in Manchester, you've grappled with this question. I mean, what is the picture that you see in terms of housing for people who want to come to work here? Are there places where they can move that aren't going to bust the budget, or where does that stand?
Yeah, the availability of workforce housing across all sectors of the workforce has been identified as a significant issue, both in the South Shire and in the North Shire. We've done some studies specific to Bennington, and I know it's one of the issues that's being looked at now in the North Shire Economic Development Study. And Bill can probably speak to some of the specific findings and recommendations that have come out of those studies, but certainly in the Manchester area, it's pretty well documented that given the size of the workforce and the place where a lot of those folks live, there should be opportunities for people to live closer to where they work. I think the numbers, if I remember from the presentation the other night, there's around 5,000 employees in the Manchester area, which is greater than the population of the town. So it's a big job center, and there's nowhere near enough housing, especially housing for a lot of the service sector workers. It's that type of quality housing just isn't there, and a big need, a big demand that's been identified is for the kind of housing that young professionals and workers want, which is close to the center of the town, where there's things to do, where it's a very walkable community, and it's just really not there in the Manchester area. So that's one of the things we're looking at, is how can we provide housing that's affordable, that will provide place for those folks to live. It will, frankly, increase the vibrancy of the community as well when you bring that kind of energy and people into the community who are living there as well as working there. So that certainly is a big issue, and it's in Bennington. It's been similar issues, but maybe not so much on the affordability question. There's been an issue with the overall quality of housing and the relative amounts of rental housing versus home ownership opportunities in the center of town. Again, looking for opportunities for good quality housing near the center of town, where there's ready access to jobs and shopping and schools and things like that. It's a bit of an issue, in different slant on it, but it's an issue in both parts of the region.
Well, I guess that sort of begs the question then, what do we do to solve that? I mean, is it a question of changing zoning rules on apartment densities? Is it finding ways of getting developers to be incentivized to build low-cost housing projects? A number of initiatives I know have been tried over the years. Why is this such a hard nut to crack, I guess, is my question.
So in the Northshire study, I mean, we just have recently completed the market analysis. And one of the things that really jumps out, and we have heard anecdotally, we've heard in our focus groups, this workforce housing challenge, kind of looking at just the raw numbers and taking market analyses with a grain of salt, because they're rear looking, right? And we're trying to look forward and predict kind of the future, right? So it's one of the inherent kind of challenges with market studies. But just kind of looking at the existing conditions, we know that it's very expensive to build in Manchester due to the cost of land, due to construction costs currently, and that the private sector, that kind of private market, is really constrained with regard to how to make that happen. So there may be opportunities to change density issues, which would kind of bring down the cost of land relative to the number of people that are living on any given parcel. But I think to really make it happen, you have to find some type of creative public-private partnership where the public sector plays a role there in bringing down kind of the costs to market development to make that happen. Unfortunately, given funding mechanisms for housing, we see that most of those public funds are available at the lower income level, 60% or less of median income. And what we're really targeting is something much closer, and maybe 80% to 120% of median income to make real workforce housing. So part of this maybe involve recommendations for political changes, which make maybe same amounts of money just differently available to different sectors to try to solve some of these challenges. But I think it's going to take some creative solutions, and I think at some level, particularly in the Northshire, somebody's going to have to make a leap and try to kind of force demand by building these types of units and seeing how it works. I'm going from here. I'm sorry, Joe. I'm going from here shortly to do a focus group with the Northshire Young Professionals, and one of these issues is going to be kind of on this housing issue. And if this housing existed in and about downtown Manchester, kind of what would the interest level be? And just kind of anecdotally. So, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it's a similar, again, another similarity with Bennington, but with a slightly different slant is, and Bill talked about driving demand. There's a lot of potentially available housing that would meet the demand in and around the center of Bennington, but a lot of work needs to go into improving some of the existing housing stock to make it really attractive. And it's kind of one of the things, you've got to get past the threshold. There has to be enough investment up front to start improving the overall quality of the housing stock in the neighborhoods, and then you're going to start attracting more people to the area, and then you'll start attracting more private investment to the area. But it's kind of getting the ball rolling and getting over that threshold to get that to start. And that's where organizations like ours and the municipalities come in. What are the tools and techniques that are available to help move that forward?
What does the Regional Commission do, or how can you sort of address and approach one of the issues, Bill, I think you talked about right at the start of the show, and that's that whole demographic time bomb, I guess you could say, that's going on, where we have an aging population that's going to have different needs from what may exist now. I mean, how big of a, is it a problem, or is it an opportunity perhaps in disguise to do something? And I guess the second part of that question is, do you see any indication that that's going to ever turn around? Will we kind of sort of get back closer to the national average in terms of a demographic profile, or are we just basically
I think it
joined with Maine and going to be the oldest two states in the
I
country?
think it could, and I'll let Bill answer the question, but I did want to point out one statistic that reflects what you're saying that was really interesting. One of our North Shire communities, we do a regional plan update every few years, so we just finished one this year and looked at the demographic profiles and all the communities in the region. And one of the North Shire communities, it was fascinating. Over the previous 10-year period, the average age of residents increased by 9.9 years over a 10-year period. Ordinarily,
Wow.
you would think that they would pretty much kind of stay about the same as people are born and people die and people
Right.
move in and people move out. It's just like the whole population just got older.
Wow.
So it's like, it's definitely an issue. So.
Well, it's certainly real, but I think you hit on a key point, because I do think with that challenge there are opportunities. And let's just follow the housing discussion that we've been having for a moment. I mean, what we know in other areas around the country is that the type of housing that we just talked about for millennials, kind of downtown, around amenities, near restaurants, able to walk to the bank, go to the post office, those types of things, are equally attractive to empty nesters and retirees.
Sure.
So I think there are opportunities that suggest that there's more than just this millennial market that could be interested in this type of housing, which potentially makes it viable to do. And I think there are, additionally, if you kind of look at even broader, kind of optimistically hopeful social solutions, I think there are real opportunities for types of intergenerational solutions, to problems. Driving back from a meeting the other day on NPR, I heard a story of these communities that are building up to support foster parents. And these communities have provided below market rate rents to older people who are willing to live in the community, provided that they volunteer time to help support these foster families and work with the foster children. And kind of they built this kind of, it takes a village model, intergenerationally. And I'm not suggesting that as a model, but I am suggesting creative kind of intergenerational solutions, similar types of housing, could take that challenge and kind of flip it on its ear and make it a real opportunity.
And I think that certainly the folks that we've talked to, the younger people who've worked in our office, they like the area. They want to live in places like Bennington County. It's attractive to folks for a lot of reasons. The communities and the feel of community is very important to people. The ready access to services, the beautiful natural environment. So they like living here, and there's opportunities now. I know an awful lot of folks who work a couple days a week out of their homes or in small offices, and then maybe have go over to Albany or other areas for 1 or 2 days a week. So people do want to live here. So it's really just kind of creating the opportunities that will allow more young business people, young entrepreneurs, young professionals to move into the area. I mean, to stay here, frankly.
Right.
And I think, I'm sorry, but just to jump on that quickly, I think part of that is building those, again, with this theme of economic gardening and building on existing assets. I think we identified in Bennington, and we're identifying in the North Shire that one of those keys is building those types of entrepreneurial support programs that allows people with a creative idea who want to be here in Vermont to kind of build a business and make sure that it's successful. And there's a public sector role there for those types of support programs with regard to perhaps inexpensive space to start a business, the appropriate trainings, networking opportunities, that kind of co-working incubator, that type of model.
Right.
I think that's clearly within the, kind of public-private sector combo realm to really, hit that one out of the park.
Okay. So in other words, like Peter Odierna, one of your colleagues from the Bennington County Industrial Corporation, said this morning, hipsters want it, I believe was
Yes.
the way he put it, in terms of folks who are being priced out of living in Manhattan or Brooklyn should consider coming to Bennington or Manchester, where,
Sure.
relatively speaking, the cost of living is a lot less,
Sure.
and you can still commute back and forth,
Or
either
telecommute.
remotely or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Well, we could talk about all of this stuff, I think, for quite a while longer, but
Sure could.
we're just about out of time. But I just wanted to thank you both,
Yeah.
Bill Colvin, Jim Sullivan from the Bennington County Regional Commission, for being with us today and sharing some thoughts about the economy and other issues in Bennington County, and also thanking you folks for tuning in and watching us today. This has been The Front Page on GNAT TV. I'm Andrew McKeever. It's been a pleasure being with you, and we'll see you the next time. Thank you very much.